Welcome to Root Words, a podcast that explores agriculture and cooking's role in connecting us to our landscape and our communities. I'm Stephen Abitel. Root Words is a collaboration between Vermont Farmers Food Center, Shrewsbury Agricultural Education and Arts Foundation, and many other community members. The project began in 2017 and was made possible by support from the National Endowment for the Humanities, as well as from this community. Throughout this podcast, you're going to be hearing stories from people around the Rutland County region in the heart of Vermont, a region rich in agriculture, family farms, a region that's a pastoral working landscape. These stories are going to be each little windows into what a regional food system really looks like on the community level. We're excited to introduce you to some passionate folks working with the land and with food and bringing communities together. So please pull up a chair and enjoy. While working on Root Words episode 14, Foraging, I came across Tina Picz, a forager, food photographer, and food stylist in the Mad River Valley. Tina addresses equity and justice in food systems through conversations she facilitates on her social media channels. These conversations center and uplift the voices of food sovereignty workers and create space for BIPOC leaders in food systems, land use, and health. On this episode of Root Words, we'll explore the importance of affinity spaces for BIPOC Vermonters while experiencing their foodways. We'll hear from Olivia Pena, founder of Vermont RELEAF Collective, a network by and for Black, Indigenous, and people of color advancing racial equity in land, environment, agriculture, and foodways.
My name is Olivia Pena. Many people know me as Liv. I use she, her pronouns, and I currently live in South Burlington, Vermont. I am the founder and community organizer with the Vermont RELEAF Collective.
And we'll reconnect with Tina Picz.
Hi, so I'm Tina Picz, and I live in the Mad River Valley in Vermont, and I'm a food photographer and food stylist. And I moved up to Vermont a little over a year ago from Boston. I'm really interested in nutrient-dense foods, and our family's vegetarian and pescatarian. So learning new ways to use vegetables and herbs and fruit and learning a lot more of the lesser known ones has pushed me into just different realms of researching and learning about, different regional cooking and different types of things that you can find that, they're free to us. It's overwhelming, but it's very meditative for me because I'm connecting to each season more mindfully, I guess. For me, I'm Filipino American, I'm Asian American, and I don't know a lot of Asian Americans that forage, but I know they exist, but I don't personally know a lot of them. And I'm just starting to learn through the BIPOC community here in Vermont, just different people that are into it. A lot of us are part of a collective called Vermont RELEAF Collective. I'm sure you've probably heard about it. And it's for BIPOC people in Vermont that are all involved with food, agriculture, foraging, food industry work. And so we have, monthly meetings and online and different events to discuss and connect on those realms. So as I'm learning so much right now about Black, Indigenous, and people of color and my own connection to my Asian American culture and herbalism and things that I am interested in that realm. I think just seeing what these BIPOC-led farms and organizations are doing to empower BIPOC people here, I think is just an incredible model for others to be able to follow in other states. And it's just been amazing to watch these things grow, these groups, and just the support that we've received through it and the ability to talk about these things, like you said, without the gaze of colonizer, white colonizer gaze. So it's just, it creates a safe space for people who are land stewards or people that are interested in food and land to connect on that level. And it's been really great for me, just learning about our foodways and how that really connects us to ourselves and to nature and to our family and our heritage. So I'm only in the past few years learning about my Filipino heritage and foodways. So for me, that's become really important, just learning from my mother and understanding how that is healing for BIPOC people. And it heals trauma, I think, and it allows us to feel culturally validated and to, see how our foodways and our lineage empowers us, I think has been really important for me. And we have events that allow us to share food from our cultures and to just share space together and connect with other BIPOC in Vermont, because there's not a ton of BIPOC in Vermont, and the people that are here really do try to get together and help one another to see that our liberation is possible through community. And I think community healing is a really important thing for me and for the community I've joined. And Vermont RELEAF Collective allows people to share what's going on at their farms, on their own land, to share anything they're learning about their land or their farm. So like I grow a small garden in my yard, and that was like one of the main reasons I wanted to move up here, was just to have the space and ability to do that and to learn from others around me. So just learning from the other people, like what grows when and what's going on in your garden. And, these things allow us to not rely on government systems for food. And I think food sovereignty has become a really big thing for me. These groups allow us to figure out ways that we can share our gardens, share our space, create urban farms like Conscious Homestead, like Susu Community Farm, where people can come together to own land and steward land that otherwise may not be available to them. And, creating these fundraisers for these groups. And, these are obviously times of change and insecurity for a lot of people, and food insecurity and food sovereignty are just things that I think more people need to be aware of, and aware of the ability each person has to grow their own food, and creating the spaces for us all to feel safe to do that, whether we have the money to own land or not. And I think that that's becoming possible through these groups like Vermont RELEAF Collective, Susu, and Conscious Homestead.
Tina is a member of Vermont RELEAF Collective. Beneath its 4 focus areas, land, environment, agriculture, and foodways, RELEAF practices 3 main initiatives: building community, sharing opportunities, and amplifying voices. This past November, I got a chance to connect with Olivia Pena, Vermont RELEAF's founder and community organizer, to learn about why she was inspired to launch the RELEAF Collective in Vermont.
So I started RELEAF summer 2020. I am someone who has worked in many spaces around the food system. I studied food systems at the University of Vermont, got 2 degrees in it. And just throughout my time of, working in different food system spaces, I was very pulled towards kind of the social side of food and the implications of kind of the current structure of the food system and the implications that it has on people. And so throughout my time working in food and learning about food, I'd often find that I was the only Black person and person of color in a space, like a food, like anything related to like food systems, agriculture, farming, etc. And so I found that to be very isolating. And on top of that, I was starting to connect with many other folks of color who were involved in food or food systems or agriculture. And I was like, wait, I know you and I know this person, and you two are doing such great work that would have so many powerful connections, but you don't know each other. And so I think between kind of the isolation that I experienced, as well as some of the connections that I was making and wanted other folks to connect, that really inspired me to launch the Vermont RELEAF Collective. And from there, our community has blossomed into a network created by and for Black, Indigenous, and people of color in Vermont who are passionate about and involved in land, environment, agriculture, and food. So I had a conversation recently with someone talking about the organization, and they were like, "Oh, you're a relief organization." And so sometimes folks will say relief, sometimes they'll say relief. And so I realized that they understood the organization as, this relief organization. And I was like, well, we're a little bit more, I would say, like, focus on self-determination than that, but we're not a relief organization. That's our name. And it's an acronym. So RELEAF stands for Racial Equity in Land, Environment, Agriculture, and Food. And really, this community is so critical and important in our state because, nothing like it really existed before we launched. So we're a network solely comprised of BIPOC folks and really tapping in to our strengths, our knowledge, our experiences, and using that to support each other and really build on the incredible work and experiences and joy that exists in our community.
Can I ask you to go a little bit deeper into those 4 focus areas? So what does racial equity look like in land, environment, agriculture, and foodways?
Absolutely. So in terms of those spaces, working towards racial equity looks like folks having the space and the means and all of the tools that they need to both thrive and enjoy their experiences in these spaces. So one of the key parts of RELEAF is that we are an organization that is really focused on, not centering professionalism. And so certainly we have folks in our community who are entrepreneurs, who are farmers, who are researchers by trade. And while those folks are certainly in our community, we also have folks kind of like myself who might not have like formal work at the moment in these spaces, but more so, might like to cook and enjoy eating, or are casually, farming on their windowsill, or just really like livestock or hiking. And so it looks really broad for a lot of people. And so in terms of how, racial equity shows up in those spaces, we don't really think of it in one specific way, but rather holistically, and make sure that folks are, working towards this idea of folks thriving and experiencing joy and, getting to lead in and just even show up and, have safe space in the 4 focus areas, which again are land, environment, agriculture, and food.
Okay, so what are some obstacles for folks in the BIPOC community in Vermont when thinking about trying to get a farm or garden business going off the ground?
Yeah, well, I think there's a lot. Sometimes it might be something like, knowledge or not sure where to start or how to start. And it could also be, financial barriers in terms of having the financial backing to be able to afford that. And then there are some more like just directly like kind of, sometimes these are considered covert, but I just personally believe that they're still overt forms of racism. But things like, getting denied capital or loans from lending institutions, or maybe having a difficult time working with a service provider, simply due to race. So I think, there's a lot of barriers in terms of farming, and even things like time. Like for myself, I'd love to be a farmer one day. And I also have to keep working if I ever want to afford a farm. And like throughout all of this time that I'm working, I'm like, wait, when do I actually like learn how to start the process of finding a farm and, affording a farm? there's certainly a lot of farm services in the state of Vermont. And I think what's really unique about what Relief is working on is that we are the foremost organization who is really focusing our, farming support and entrepreneurial support specifically on BIPOC, specifically for BIPOC folks. So there are a lot of, really great service provision programs happening across the state. And yes, definitely in Northern Vermont. And what's really key about the work that we're doing is that we're making sure that all of our supports and services are really tailored to BIPOC, with support from someone who is knowledgeable about the experience, and, from that firsthand perspective of lived experience.
So I guess kind of related to that, you've got on your website, the core priority is creating a network, an affinity platform for BIPOC to thrive around land, environment, agriculture, and foodways. What does this network mean for your members, and what does it provide for them?
So our network is everything. Like, there would be no Vermont RELEAF Collective without our members, and our members make up our network. And I would even just go a step farther to say part of our, mission and core values is really focusing on, building power in our community. And so our people are power, and the more that folks connect through this network, it just builds more power in the community through this platform that we have. And so currently we have 200 members from all across the state. Members come from 13 out of 14 counties. So if there are any BIPOC folks who are up in Essex County and would like to join the community, we would love to have you, when you're ready to join. But we have this really amazing network from all across the state, which has been so incredible to watch just grow and flourish. And so currently, currently we have an email list. And so this is kind of like the most constant way that we're existing and members have to connect with each other. So through the email list, we have folks who are, sharing questions and, starting discussions around, what does the term BIPOC mean to you? Or sharing resources like, hey, I just found this grant, or I just found this program that I'm really curious about. Does anyone have any experience with this program? Or I had a really great time in this program, like, you all should check it out. Or even folks who are just sharing, different products, or saying, hey, we didn't use our chicken coop this year. We're selling it at a discount to Relief members. We are selling our wood stove, and we'd love for someone in the community to, take it. And so it's just been really cool to see the different, kind of like connections that people have made, whether it's through, products or resources. But I think what has been the most powerful is really just that social connection. So oftentimes folks have joined the community, and they have said, I'm just here looking for connection. I don't need help starting a farm. I'm not looking for a new recipe. I, am not really trying to go hiking. I just want connection. And then seeing some of the relationships and connections and projects and like entire other organizations that have formed out of the Relief Network has been really incredible. Our flagship event is called our Community Dinner and Conversations. And so they started off on Zoom, and we've been doing them since September 2020. And so these are basically what we think of as like virtual potlucks. So we have them once a month, and folks will, come to the quote unquote Zoom table and, bring a dinner with them. And in this space, it's really just kind of like a casual, informal time that members can come together and, get to know each other, share different resources, or maybe make some requests. So we have a time called range time that members can, make requests of each other or share an offering. And so what that request might be is something like, hey, I'm, back on the job market after 10 years and was hoping for someone to read my resume. Or, hey, I'm looking for help on my farm for a day, and I'll provide, a small stipend and lunch. Or an offering could be something like, hey, we have a bunch of gleaned apples left over from this year. They're not beautiful, but, if someone wants to take them, please do. Or maybe I need to practice my photography skills, and wondering if anyone was interested in being a guinea pig for headshots. So that's kind of a key area of this, we kind of have that in an ongoing fashion through our email list, but through our Grange time, that's always kind of a more face-to-face, in Zoom format of how this exists. And then finally, for these virtual community dinners, we have time where we discuss a topic that's related to one of the 4 focus areas, but it's broad enough that anyone, no matter their background, can participate. So, it might be something like what grew for you this year? What's an area that you really grew in? So it could be someone saying I grew really good onions this year, or it could be something like I grew an interest in fishing, or I grew more patient. So it can look like a lot of things, but we try to keep it broad enough, knowing that there's a wide variety of backgrounds and experiences in our community. So after, numbers in the pandemic started decreasing a lot this past summer, and vaccines were rolling out, we were like, okay, we feel more comfortable now gathering in person. And so this summer we started doing in-person community dinners, which have been kind of similar, but a little bit less of a structured format, given that it's, kind of this fluid space, and, we're not all sharing the same Zoom room. So we were able to convene all across the state this summer for our in-person community dinners, where we were able to have food from different BIPOC vendors and food, businesses, and just share space with our community members, and integrating in different activities and, recreational opportunities. So through those are really beautiful to kind of share space in different folks' communities around the state. And really, it's just so incredible to see these relationships that have been blooming, over the email list, over Zoom, and see them come to life really on the ground, because, the first letter of the first of the 4 focus areas is land. And so having this connection with land and having connection with land in other folks' communities, it's really key for our community.
Let's talk a little more about amplifying voices. Who are a few examples of folks in the agricultural or food business world that you think should have their work more elevated?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. So I'm glad that you circled back to amplifying voices. So one thing that I think is so important to lift up about the work of Vermont RELEAF Collective is that while we are, this container, this platform for our community, we're not a monolith. And so it's really important that we strike the balance between, having this space where BIPOC voices and, voices and experiences of our community can be heard and affirmed and amplified. And at the same time, we don't want to, we want to make sure that folks understand this one voice is not the story for the whole community, and that there are so many unique voices and stories and experiences in the community. So when we think about amplification, part of one of the key reasons of RELEAF existing is to recognize that BIPOC folks in the state of Vermont are not as recognized as we should be for our contributions around land, environment, agriculture, and food. And so, that looks oftentimes in kind of our amplification through our Instagram, you'll often see businesses or projects. And we got to a point where we said, okay, we want to be lifting up these different businesses and, our peer organizations. And a lot of us as individuals who aren't tied to a business or organization, and, just have a really interesting story need to be heard too. And so I would say it's kind of like a both and. So I think it's really key to be lifting up a lot of these incredible BIPOC businesses who exist in our community and in our state. And it's also important that we're hearing from folks who, might not be connected to a business or an organization, who might not be, constantly, having a platform anyway. So I think it's really important that that amplification shows up in, recognizing folks of like, it's really exciting that, BIPOC folks are here in the first place, and doing really amazing work in the spaces of land, environment, agriculture, and food. So I don't know, I feel like this is a easy answer, but truly all members have really incredible stories that if they want to, I think the world should hear it.
So you're doing some work with Vermont RELEAF Collective to use your social media presence and your kind of network to elevate stories that have been, let's say, under-celebrated in the Vermont narrative. Aside from that, the work that you're specifically doing for that, like this is maybe a bigger kind of conversation, like a big state kind of conversation. What can be done to like better balance this?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I think it's kind of reframing. Yeah, I think it's kind of reframing this idea of, speaking from the state perspective, reframing the idea of who is a Vermonter. And I feel like when I first came to Vermont to study at UVM, a Vermonter is someone who is, 7 generations, and I feel like it's creeping up to 8 now. And so keeping that in mind of like that is, in my opinion, false. And I think a Vermonter is someone who, lives here and, takes space. And so, yeah, I think, definitely reframing the idea of like, who is a quote unquote typical Vermonter, because it's all of us. There is no one typical Vermonter. And then kind of honing in on these 4 focus areas, just reframing the visual and the idea of who is a farmer. If you Google, Vermont farmer, BIPOC folks aren't, taking up the whole screen of pictures. But recognizing like we are here, there are BIPOC folks who are farming. There are BIPOC folks who are, owning food businesses, who are on the hiking trails, who are sailing on the lake. And so making sure that like we are here, we are present, we are doing things. And so, making sure that folks are across the state are aware of that and respect that as well.
Here, can you describe how do you relate to your foodways? Like, what's your, I guess, experience with that? What are your thoughts on your foodways?
Yeah, well, so yeah, this is a good question. So I grew up in New Jersey, and I grew up in a very small suburb. It's a primarily Italian town. And I guess Irish too. Italian American and Irish American. Not too many folks who recently, came to this country from there. But yeah, so I grew up identifying as a pizza snob. But more than that, my dad's family is from the Dominican Republic. And so being in the tri-state area, it was pretty easy to access a lot of some of the staple foods, and, some of, I would say, when I say staple foods, I really mean the seasonings. And so there are just some, key foods up here, like I would say fried cheese, which is a pretty key ingredient in this delicious dish called mango, which is mashed up green bananas. And then you have it with some fried cheese that you can just cut a slice of cheese. It's kind of like, I'm blanking on the name of it, but it's like there's this other kind of cheese that's called like a grilling cheese. And so it's similar to that. But yeah, that's something that I like seldom find up here. I also really love maduros, which are sweet bananas, sweet plantains, and it's often pretty hard to find really good bananas for maduros up here. So yeah, I think that there are some foods that are really key to my foodways. in my food culture, such as, trying to eat a more plant-based diet. And so I often will substitute nutritional yeast for cheese to make like a vegan mac and cheese. And so I feel like that's everywhere because we have so many kind of like natural, quote unquote, natural food stores. But then there are other foods that are really key to, my family and my cultural upbringing that it's just a little bit harder to find. Even something like Presidente beer, which is, one of the main beers in the Dominican Republic. It's generally not a beer that you find up here, and want to give a shout out to Maria from Cafe Mama Juana, who I hope that she's able to bring it to Burlington, bring Presidente beer to Burlington to sell in her shop sometime.
Awesome. And who have been some of your inspirations, either like in the work you do, or you want to do, or your passions or your life? Who are some inspirations to you?
Yeah. Okay. Well, I definitely have to start by shouting out Farine Paris-Meyer, who is the owner and CEO of All Heart Inspirations. I met Farine when I was an orientation leader after my first year of college at UVM. And Farine, I think of her as like kind of like my first boss, and she truly just showed what it means to lead authentically and kind of lead from the heart. And also in terms of just like how Relief is structured, Farine is the first person who I learned about an affinity space from. So having a space for folks of color to convene and kind of share their experiences, share how they're feeling. And so I really just often think of Farine in terms of an inspiration for the community and, as a leader. And she's doing really, really, really incredible work with her business, All Heart Inspirations, and is truly a leader in the community as well in terms of, how she runs her business, how she, shows up and creates these beautiful spaces truly from the heart. And shares those with others. So it's really no question why people keep coming back to her business. And I would encourage folks listening to check her out too. And on top of that, in addition to these beautiful heartfelt spaces that she cultivates, she also makes really, really incredible food that is inspired by her ancestry in Haiti.
What do you want folks to know about the work you're doing with Vermont RELEAF Collective?
Yeah, absolutely. So again, just affirming like we are here, we take up space, and we are doing really incredible things as a BIPOC community, as multiple BIPOC communities around the state in relation to land, environment, agriculture, and food. And so, next time you're thinking of, even just in terms of like how you think of these different focus areas, like don't forget that there are Black farmers. Don't forget that there are Latinx hikers. And, more than that, definitely supporting and seeking out businesses that are owned by and run by folks of color as well. They're bringing a lot of flavor and, new ideas and perspectives to these spaces across Vermont. For example, I think of Calabash Gardens in the Upper Valley. They are growing saffron, really incredible saffron at that. And, making it accessible for the Vermont community. Like I never thought that I would, purchase saffron, but, now I can think of like, oh, cool. Like my family can make a risotto made with, local to me saffron for the holidays. So yeah, I would just say recognizing and amplifying the fact that we're here, because, certainly that's something that Relief is working on, is continuing to amplify voices, and it's going to take a community effort to further amplify us as well.
What do you want BIPOC Vermonters to know about the work you're doing with Relief Collective?
Well, I think one of the really exciting things about Relief is that we are really focused on being a community that is by and for our community. And so I think the exciting thing about our collective, which I've not really seen in other spaces, is that it's truly member led. So, we have this organizing team of, 8 folks. And so we are responsible for coordinating a lot of the work that happens through the collective. And there's also a lot of opportunity for members to get engaged and lead initiatives as well. So whether a member wants to see one specific meeting or see like a certain topic discussed, they can raise that with the organizing squad, and more so, if they wanted to, they can lead that meeting as well, and we can pay them for it. Members also are invited to lead workshops and share about their talent or their experience or their skills, get paid for that as well. And so truly, so many of our initiatives through the collective have really been raised by members and inspired by members. And so the way that we will continue to be a sustainable and member-driven organization is hearing from our community members about what they want to see and how they want to see it happen. And oftentimes that looks like having these initiatives really led by members. There are BIPOC folks here with skills and experience and leadership in these spaces. And so we're kind of seeing this wave where there's a lot of different organizations who are like, oh, we want to hire BIPOC folks for these like entry-level positions. And it's like, okay, well, what about your leadership roles? Which are having people who are, sitting in these seats and kind of like hoarding power essentially for years and years and decades. And, there are some folks in our community who are like, we kind of just want to stick in spaces that are for us, by us. And there are other members of our community who are like, we're ready to lead, move out the way. And I would also add paying folks well for that. I think just in general, but also in the state of Vermont, it seems like our community is often asked to do this work, or this work of advancing equity and justice often falls on BIPOC community members in an uncompensated way. So it's really, really important to pay BIPOC community members if you want them to be in the space. And if you truly want to equitably engage folks of color, you have to pay us. So I think definitely sharing space and making room for new perspectives as well as new leadership is really important in terms of transforming the food system to being a more equitable and just space.
Our connections with the land, our environment, agriculture, and our foodways are deep in Vermont, and deeply tied to quality of life for all Vermonters, though many of these decisions regarding our connections with these things happen in white spaces. And the stories that are shared of leaders in these fields have been pretty whitewashed for a long time. But all of that is shifting, and networks of BIPOC farmers, environmentalists, and food sovereignty advocates like the folks of Vermont RELEAF Collective are amplifying the voices of folks that have a lot to contribute to the future of Vermont's foodways and land use, while also creating space for folks that break the mold of who a farmer can be in Vermont. This episode was produced by Stephen Abitel. Special thanks to Tina Picz, Olivia Pena, and Vermont RELEAF Collective. To learn more, check out Vermont RELEAF Collective at www.vtreliefcollective.org. You can find Tina Picz on Instagram at Vermont Food Photo. Our musical themes are by the Salt Ash Serenaders. We are a project of the Vermont Farmers Food Center and SAGE. Thank you all for listening and for being a part of our local food system. We'll catch you next time on Root Words.